Now, within the last few hours, the tower block in Miami, which partially collapsed more than a week ago, has been demolished. Small explosions were detonated to bring down the part of the building that was still standing.
Have you ever seen buildings that were supposed to come down with a mighty crash, but instead, they just didn't? Or maybe you've seen videos of demolitions that turned into total chaos, with debris flying everywhere and workers scrambling for cover. Well, from explosions that misfire to buildings leaning awkwardly like they're defying gravity, these demolitions we're about to uncover are nothing short of disastrous. Curious to see just how wrong things can go when it comes to bringing down massive structures? Let's dive into 5 or more shocking demolitions that went horribly wrong. St. Petersburg Sports and Concert Complex in Florida. The St. Petersburg Sports and Concert Complex, opened in 1980, was more than just a building. It was a cornerstone of entertainment in Florida. Whether you were a sports fanatic or a music lover, this place had something for everyone. From high-energy tennis and bowling competitions to concerts featuring some of the world's most famous artists, this venue was buzzing with life for decades. But as with all structures, time eventually took its toll. By early 2020, the once vibrant complex had reached the end of its lifespan, and plans were drawn up for its demolition to make way for something bigger, the world's largest ice arena. Now, tearing down a building like this isn't as simple as setting off some explosives and watching it fall. It's a meticulous process that requires extensive planning. Before any explosives are placed, engineers conduct thorough surveys to understand the building's structure. This means figuring out where the main weight of the building is supported and determining which parts need to be weakened to ensure a safe, controlled collapse. Precision is everything. The goal is to bring the building down in a way that avoids damage to nearby structures and keeps everyone safe. In the case of the St. Petersburg Sports and Concert Complex, everything seemed to be going according to plan, until it wasn't. As workers were disconnecting the stadium's walls from the roof, something went terribly wrong. Without any warning, the roof collapsed unexpectedly. The building came down much earlier than it was supposed to, trapping several workers inside. Some were still on top of the structure, and with the sudden collapse, chaos ensued. Tragically, one worker lost their life, and several others were injured as they scrambled to escape the falling debris. The incident sent shockwaves through the community, highlighting just how unpredictable and dangerous building demolitions can be, even with the best safety measures in place. Demolishing a structure of this size requires not only careful planning, but also constant vigilance. One slight miscalculation, one overlooked detail, and things can spiral out of control. In this case, the early collapse of the roof seemed to stem from an error in the sequence of dismantling the connections between the roof and walls. But if you think this is the only demolition that went off the rails badly, then you should hear about the next one, because the St. Petersburg disaster is just the beginning of our list of demolition mishaps. The Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan. The Silverdome, located in Pontiac, Michigan, was once a crown jewel of American sports venues. Opening in 1975, it was a massive 83,000-seat stadium and the largest venue in the NFL for a solid 25 years. It was home to the Detroit Lions and hosted a wide array of events over the years, from NBA games and FIFA World Cup matches to the unforgettable WrestleMania 3. For decades, the Silverdome was filled with the cheers of fans and the excitement of world-class events. However, like many iconic venues, the Silverdome's glory days eventually came to an end. After Ford Field opened in Detroit, the stadium was left without a major tenant. Over the next several years, the Silverdome sat vacant, its massive structure slowly deteriorating as it awaited its fate. By 2017, the decision was made to demolish the stadium and repurpose the 199-acre site for future developments. The plan was to bring down the stadium in several stages, with the first phase involving the controlled implosion of the upper section in December of 2017. When demolition day arrived, all eyes were on the Silverdome, with many eager to see the once great stadium come down in a dramatic display. The demolition crew had meticulously placed explosives around the upper section, preparing for a textbook collapse. But when the explosives were detonated, something strange happened. Or rather, didn't happen. A few plumes of smoke rose into the air, signaling the blast, but the upper section stubbornly remained in place. It was as if the Silverdome was refusing to go down without a fight. The demolition company later explained that about 10% of the explosives had failed to detonate, leaving the structure partially intact. While they assured the public that the stadium would eventually collapse on its own, no one could say exactly when that would happen. The situation posed a significant risk, as the weakened structure was now unstable. The demolition crew returned the next day to finish the job, setting off additional explosives to bring down the rest of the upper section. Even then, the process of tearing down the Silverdome took several more months to complete. By 2019, the Silverdome was gone for good, and the site was cleared for new developments. Amazon later announced plans to build a massive warehouse on the property, signaling the end of an era. The Silverdome, once filled with the roars of football fans and the excitement of major events, had become nothing more than a distant memory. But the story of its botched demolition lives on, reminding us that even the best-laid plans can go awry. Speaking of stubborn buildings, well, let's talk about the infamous Leaning Tower of Dallas. Leaning Tower of Dallas. In 2020, Dallas, Texas was the site of a rather peculiar demolition failure that ended up turning into a local spectacle. The 11-story office building in question was part of a much larger plan. City officials had secured funding for a massive $2.5 billion development project. This new development promised to transform the area with new residential properties, office spaces, and entertainment venues. The only thing standing in the way? An old, towering office building that needed to be demolished. As the demolition day approached, the excitement in the air was palpable. Crowds gathered to witness the spectacle of a building being reduced to rubble in a matter of seconds. Everything seemed to be going according to plan as the first round of explosives went off. A series of loud booms echoed through the city, and smoke billowed out of the windows. The structure began to crumble just as expected. But then, something odd happened. Once the dust started to settle, it became clear that not everything had gone as planned. While most of the building had collapsed as expected, a large portion remained standing. The demolition team had not accounted for one major oversight: the elevator shaft. Unlike the rest of the building, the shaft had been constructed with much stronger materials to support the elevator system. This made it far more resistant to the explosives. Instead of collapsing like the rest of the building, the elevator shaft tilted slightly and remained standing. The result? A bizarre leaning tower, which locals quickly dubbed the Leaning Tower of Dallas. What made the situation even trickier was the fact that the leaning structure was too unstable for workers to approach safely. They couldn't just walk up to it and finish the demolition manually. For days, the tower stood there, drawing curious onlookers who came to marvel at the strange sight. Some even started a petition to keep the tower as a quirky new tourist attraction. It wasn't long before pictures of the leaning structure went viral, with people jokingly comparing it to the famous Leaning Tower of Pisa. Eventually, though, the fun had to end. The remaining structure was brought down the old-fashioned way by using a wrecking ball. It was a slower and less spectacular process, but finally the site was cleared and the new construction project could begin. But the Leaning Tower of Dallas isn't the only demolition that left people shaking their heads. Up next is a demolition that almost led to a catastrophe. Let's take a trip to Kayseri, Turkey, former flour factory. In an ideal demolition scenario, a building comes down exactly as planned, with minimal disruption to the surrounding area. But as we're seeing, things don't always go according to plan. And that's exactly what happened in Kayseri, Turkey, when a demolition crew set out to bring down a former flour factory. The building, which had stood since 1928, was a massive 80-foot structure. It had been abandoned for years after the flour company went out of business, and the city decided it was time for it to go. The demolition team had chipped away at the base of the building, leaving just enough of the structure intact for the final explosion to bring it down in one swift movement. Or so they thought. When the explosives were detonated, something very strange happened. Instead of collapsing inward and crumbling to the ground, the building wobbled and then rolled over onto its roof. completely intact. It was like watching a slow-motion fall in an action movie, except this was real, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The building toppled over like a massive tree, and onlookers were left speechless. Panic spread quickly as the building rolled toward a nearby row of apartment buildings. For a moment, it seemed like disaster was inevitable. Luckily, the structure came to a halt before causing any major damage to the neighboring buildings. Miraculously, no one was injured in the incident, but it left everyone wondering how such a bizarre mishap could have occurred. Upon further investigation, it became clear that the demolition team had miscalculated the angle at which the explosives were placed. Instead of causing the building to collapse inward, the charges had pushed it sideways, leading to the dramatic toppling event. The aftermath of this demolition fail was more embarrassing than anything else. The crew had to spend days cleaning up the mess and figuring out how to finish the job. In the end, it was a lesson in just how unpredictable demolitions can be, even with careful planning. Ready for more demolition drama? The next story takes us to Denmark, where a silo demolition went from bad to worse, with a cultural center caught in the crossfire, a gigantic 170-foot silo. When it comes to demolishing a structure as massive as a 170-foot silo, you need everything to go off without a hitch. The stakes are high, especially when there's a cultural center and library sitting right next to it. That was the case in Denmark when demolition experts were tasked with taking down the towering silo. The plan was to set charges at strategic points to ensure the structure would collapse inward, minimizing the risk to the surrounding buildings. As always, safety was the top priority. The area was cleared, and the team double-checked their calculations to make sure everything would go according to plan. But as you've probably guessed by now, things didn't go as smoothly as everyone had hoped. When the explosives were detonated, the silo began to collapse, but not in the direction it was supposed to. Instead of falling inward, one side of the silo held firm, causing the whole structure to tip toward the library and cultural center. In a matter of seconds, the silo came crashing down onto the very buildings they had worked so hard to protect. The impact was devastating. The front wall of the cultural center was completely destroyed, and the interior was covered in debris and dust. Important areas, including administrative offices, archives, and even a music school, were severely damaged. Witnesses stood in shock as papers and books from the library were sent flying through the air, carried by the gust of wind from the collapse. Firefighters and rescue workers rushed to the scene, working through the night to stabilize the remaining structure and prevent any further damage. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the repair costs were substantial. An investigation revealed that a mistake in the placement of the explosives had caused the silo to fall in the wrong direction. Now, if you think this is the height to demolition mishap out there, you're in for a surprise. Smokestack in Pell City, Alabama. Let's shift our focus to one of the most talked about demolitions that happened in Pell City, Alabama. Imagine this. A huge smokestack, once towering over the city, was set for demolition. But unlike your typical building takedown with loud explosions and carefully placed charges, this one was different. The team in charge of tearing down the smokestack didn't use any explosives at all. Instead, they relied on a large backhoe. Yes, a backhoe. The idea was to chip away at the base of the smokestack brick by brick until the structure's own weight caused it to collapse. Sounds simple, right? Well, not quite. The plan was for the smokestack to come down in a controlled manner, falling straight to the ground. As the backhoe operator carefully worked to remove the last few bricks holding the base together, it seemed like everything was going smoothly. Onlookers gathered to witness the event, eager to watch the smokestack crash to the ground. But then, things took a dangerous turn. Instead of coming down in a neat, straight line, the smokestack began to lean, directly toward the backhoe. In an instant, the operator realized what was happening and tried to swing the machine out of the way. It was a race against time, but unfortunately, the heavy brick structure was faster. Before anyone could react, the smokestack collapsed right on top of the backhoe, burying it under a massive pile of debris. The crowd gasped in horror. People rushed to check on the operator, fearing the worst. It wasn't just a few bricks that fell, it was hundreds of pounds of debris crushing the backhoe beneath. But here's where the story takes an incredible turn. Against all odds, the operator emerged from the wreckage, bruised and visibly shaken, but alive. As it turned out, a large portion of the smokestack had actually crashed through the top of the backhoe's cab. But the reinforced structure of the cab itself had held up just enough to protect him from what could have easily been a fatal accident. Footage from the demolition, captured by drones, later went viral. The dramatic video showed just how close the operator had come to disaster. The collapse had been chaotic, and the fact that the operator survived with only minor injuries made the video even more unbelievable. It's one of those demolition fails that people still talk about, and for good reason. But what went wrong, exactly? It turns out that the demolition crew hadn't accounted for the smokestack's balance and structure as carefully as they should have. Without the precision of explosives to control the direction of the fall, the smokestack's natural weight distribution caused it to lean unpredictably as it came down. This oversight almost cost someone their life. Clothing factory in Czech Republic, Prostějov. Next on our demolition journey, we travel to the charming city of Prostějov in the Czech Republic. There once stood an old clothing factory which had seen better days. This factory, abandoned for years after the company went bankrupt, was now nothing more than an empty, crumbling relic. The decision had been made to bring it down to make way for new development. So a professional demolition team was brought in to handle the job. They planned the demolition carefully, ensuring all safety measures were in place and the surrounding area was clear. The structure wasn't particularly tall or complex, but demolitions are tricky. The team meticulously placed the explosives in key areas, calculated the force needed, and set up a safe viewing distance for the crowd that had gathered to watch. This wasn't just any demolition, it was a spectacle. As the countdown to detonation began, everyone braced themselves for the big moment. And when the explosives finally went off, it was as if everything happened in slow motion. The charges exploded in perfect sequence, left to right, creating a flawless demolition. The building didn't topple over like a giant falling tree. Instead, it collapsed straight down, just as planned. For a few seconds, the crowd was in awe of the textbook perfect execution. But that's when things took a dangerous turn. As the dust began to settle, a piece of debris, a large chunk of rock to be precise, shot out from the explosion with terrifying speed. Now, this wasn't some tiny pebble. It was a rock about the size of a softball, and it was flying straight toward the crowd. Despite being positioned more than a quarter of a mile away, the crowd wasn't as safe as they thought. The chunk of debris whizzed past several people, including a cameraman, who captured the entire thing on video. It barely missed 5 onlookers by mere inches before zipping through the trees. The excitement of the demolition quickly turned to panic as people realized just how close they'd come to a serious injury. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it served as a reminder that even a perfectly planned demolition can still carry unexpected dangers. The demolition crew later reviewed the incident and determined that a small miscalculation in the blast radius had caused the debris to fly out. It was a freak occurrence, but it could have ended much worse. Now let's take things to a whole new level of danger: Liverpool apartments. In the years following the Second World War, British cities faced the urgent need for affordable housing to accommodate a rapidly growing population. High-rise residential blocks were seen as a quick and practical solution to this problem. But as the decades passed, many of these buildings, once symbols of modern living, began to be seen as outdated and unsightly, overshadowing skylines with their aging concrete structures. This was particularly the case with Churchill House and Montgomery House in Liverpool. These towering 14-story buildings, built to last, were due for demolition in 2016 to make way for more contemporary developments. When it comes to demolishing such large structures, there's no room for error. Planning a demolition involves carefully assessing the building's structure, considering nearby surroundings, and ensuring public safety. For these towers, the demolition team spent weeks meticulously preparing. The goal was to take them down using controlled explosions, a process that requires precise calculations. Explosives were strategically placed around the foundations of both buildings, ensuring they would collapse inward without causing damage to nearby properties. Barriers were set up to keep the public at a safe distance, and the entire process was carefully monitored by experts who had years of experience. But even with the best-laid plans, things don't always go as expected. On the day of the demolition, a large crowd gathered, eager to see these once iconic towers reduced to rubble. The charges were detonated, and everyone held their breath, waiting for the buildings to collapse. But nothing happened. Both towers stood stubbornly in place, as if refusing to go down without a fight. It was an anticlimactic moment, to say the least. The demolition team, clearly frustrated, regrouped and planned another attempt for the following day. When the second day arrived, there was a glimmer of hope. Churchill House finally succumbed to the charges and crumbled in a near-perfect collapse. But Montgomery House once again defied the odds. Despite the explosives going off as planned, the building remained standing, seemingly untouched by the blast. It was a surreal sight. Half of the project was complete, but the other half stood tall, like a monument to the difficulties of demolition. It wasn't until the third attempt that they finally made some progress. This time, about a quarter of Montgomery House came down, but even then, the building wasn't completely demolished. At this point, the team had to resort to more manual methods. They tied cables around the remaining sections of the tower and used cranes to pull down the supports, floor by floor, in a slow and painstaking process. It took far longer than originally planned, but eventually Montgomery House was reduced to rubble. What should have been a straightforward demolition turned into a drawn-out battle between man and machine, highlighting just how unpredictable these projects can be. But this wasn't the last time a demolition would face unexpected challenges. Coming up, let's take a look at the Ohio Edison Mad River Power Plant and how one oversight caused millions in damage. Ohio Edison Mad River Power Plant. This place, nestled right in Springfield, Ohio, was a backbone of the city's energy supply for over 50 years. It opened its doors back in 1927, equipped with a hefty 20-megawatt steam turbine powered by good old coal. Imagine that this massive turbine was responsible for lighting up homes and businesses throughout the town, playing a crucial role in the daily lives of countless residents. As the years rolled on, however, the landscape of energy production began to change. With growing concerns about pollution and the environment, people started looking for cleaner, more sustainable options. By 1981, the writing was on the wall for the Mad River Power Plant, and it was officially shut down. It was a bittersweet farewell to a facility that had served its purpose well, but the future demanded new ideas and cleaner energy solutions. Now, let's fast forward to 2010, when plans were finally made to demolish this old giant. This wasn't just about clearing out an old building, it was about safety too. The power plant's towering chimney stack was still looming over the area, a silent giant that needed to come down without causing havoc in the surrounding neighborhood. Demolition experts were called in, and they knew this was going to be a delicate operation. They conducted extensive surveys to understand the structure's layout and installed explosives carefully around the chimney stack, making sure every detail was accounted for in their meticulous planning. But as is often the case with such ambitious projects, not everything went according to plan. Here's where the trouble began. The demolition crew overlooked a critical step. They didn't cut the rebar on the rear of the smokestack properly. This rebar was crucial for the stack's structural integrity, and its neglect proved to be a significant mistake. On top of that, they decided to use more explosives than usual and opted for delayed detonators, which was a risky move. When the moment of truth arrived and the explosives were detonated, the chimney stack didn't behave as expected. Instead of collapsing in a controlled manner, it wobbled like a top about to fall, creating a sense of unease among the onlookers. Ultimately, it fell completely in the wrong direction, something no one had anticipated. The massive structure crashed down, destroying 2 operational turbines and smashing into 2 vital power lines, plunging over 4,000 homes into darkness. Just like that, a routine demolition turned into a chaotic disaster. The aftermath was nothing short of chaotic. Residents were left without power for hours, and the estimated damage was a staggering $19 million. The scene was frantic as utility workers scrambled to restore electricity and assess the situation. In the years that followed, the fallout from this incident turned into a legal minefield. The power company pointed fingers at the demolition team, insisting they were at fault, while the demolition team retaliated, claiming that they had been given incorrect structural details, making their job much harder. This whole episode serves as a stark reminder of how a simple oversight can lead to disastrous consequences. The Mad River Power Plant is a case study in the importance of thorough planning and execution in demolition projects. It's a classic example of how one small miscalculation can snowball into something far more significant, raising questions about accountability and safety standards in the industry. Red Road Flats. Built in 1960, these iconic buildings were once celebrated as the tallest residential structures in Europe. Standing proudly in the city, they weren't just a collection of apartments. They were symbols of hope and ambition for many families looking for affordable housing in a bustling urban environment. At one point, they housed thousands of people, offering them a place to call home in a rapidly changing city. As time went on, the Red Road Flats became more than just living spaces. They became part of Glasgow's identity. The buildings were distinctive with their striking architecture and vibrant community life. But by the time 2015 rolled around, the city had decided it was time for a change. After decades of serving the community, the flats were scheduled for demolition. It was a bittersweet moment for many residents and former tenants who had fond memories of life in those towers. Explosives were set strategically at the base of each tower, with a detailed plan for how the buildings would fall. The goal was to create a controlled collapse, one that would minimize risk and maximize efficiency. To ensure the safety of onlookers, a large exclusion zone was established, and the area was cordoned off. People were excited, but also a little nervous, as is natural when witnessing such a monumental event. Then, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. The countdown began, and with a thunderous roar, the explosives were detonated. Dust and debris filled the air as the towers began to crumble. But as the dust settled and everyone held their breath in anticipation, it quickly became clear that something was amiss. To the astonishment of onlookers, several towers remained standing, defiantly refusing to succumb to the blast. What went wrong? It turns out that the contractors had faced a significant oversight during the demolition planning phase. While the buildings were designed to be strong and sturdy, built with steel rather than the more common concrete of the time, the real issue lay in the explosive calculations. The team had identified discrepancies between the original construction records and the actual dimensions of the steel being used in the building. As a result, the amount of explosives set wasn't enough to bring the structures down completely. While they had expected the blast to work effectively on the towers, it simply wasn't sufficient to counter the strength of the steel used in their construction. It was a stark reminder of how crucial it is to have accurate data when planning a demolition, especially for structures that have stood the test of time. As the realization of the failure set in, the demolition crews quickly regrouped. They knew they couldn't leave the remaining towers standing, especially not after the excitement and expectations that had built up in the community. They called for high-reach machinery, which is essentially large cranes equipped with specialized tools designed for dismantling tall structures. This method allowed them to carefully and safely take down the remaining buildings, ensuring that no one was put at risk. The entire incident left many people scratching their heads. How could a planned demolition go so wrong? The failed attempt became a talking point in Glasgow, prompting discussions about safety standards, the importance of accurate building records, and the unexpected challenges that can arise in demolition projects. In the end, while the Red Road Flats may have fallen, the lessons learned from their demolition will echo in future projects. Which of these demolitions blew your mind the most? Share with us in the comments. Thanks for watching, fam. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Don't leave without checking the next video that pops up on your screen.